The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, Succeeding in the Agile Project Environment, Increased Collaboration Through Communication by Tammy Schwambari. We're excited you're able to join us today. Set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is sponsored by IIST, the leaders in education-based training and certifications. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit testinginstitute.com. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars offered by IIST. Be sure to join us for the next webinar in this series, Software Testing and Quality Certifications, Facts and Fictions by Dr. Magdi Hanna on February 3rd from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. To learn more about this and other webinars in the series, go to testinginstitute.com. Please feel free to ask the presenter any questions throughout today's webinar through using the GoToWebinar question box. There are also two handouts in for today's webinar that you can also download in the GoToWebinar window. Please download these handouts as they will be used in today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at testinginstitute.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the high-quality education resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Tammy Schwambari. Tammy?
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining to hear Succeeding in the Agile Project Environment, Increased Collaboration Through Communication. I'm your presenter today, and I'm very excited to be here and share with you the primary means to increase your collaboration with others by improving your communication effectiveness. So quickly, just a little bit about me before we jump in so you know where I come from. But I've worked in information technology my entire career at various Fortune 500 companies, primarily delivering software and process solutions in answer to business problems. I've really done a little bit of everything in IT. I've done some coding, some testing, I've done hardware installs, business analysis, and really my primary role over the years now has been project manager. I'm a certified PM and Scrum Master. But I've got to say, early on in my career, I really learned the importance of communication and collaboration. It really drives everything. Communication is the key to your success. Now, in the Agile environment, collaboration becomes critical. Collaboration is about working jointly rather than independently to accomplish a task. Agile methodologies really stress the benefits of working with cross-functional teams to encourage strong communication between business owners, whom you gather requirements from, and the technical team that produces that product. Rather than working in functional silos, Agile methodologies promote frequent and face-to-face communications between all team members. Two of the four values in the Agile Manifesto really emphasizes the importance of collaboration, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. What that reminds us of is the importance of strong and respectful communication. So an example might be, rather than testers reporting defects to developers through a defect tracking tool or email, they're encouraged to sit down and work together and recreate and resolve that issue, right? The second value related to collaboration is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And this reminds us that it's much more important for the development team to allow for some flexibility to please the customer, working together to seek a win-win solution, opposed to being kind of rigid and following the letter of the law of the original agreement. So although collaboration is not limited to those working in the Agile methodologies, Agile development practices thrive in an organization that fosters a collaborative culture rather than a command and control type of culture. There are many tools and processes that you can use to foster strong collaboration with your team, regardless of software methodology being used. any team will benefit from fostering an environment of healthy communication, right? So my objective today is to share with you a tool that will increase your communication effectiveness. So we have an hour today. My presentation will probably last about 50 minutes, leaving the remaining time for questions. But today what I really want to cover with you is, what is communication all about? What is DISC? The benefits? How do you identify and recognize the styles? A little bit about adaptation so that you can be more effective. And then we'll answer some questions and put together some action steps. And in all of this, we're going to have just a little bit of fun with it. So to ensure that you get the most from the information I'm sharing today, as well as be able to use this in the field, you'll find in the handouts there's 2 documents. And those handouts, and hopefully you guys know where it is in the dialog box under handouts. But so the first one I want to cover is Communication for Success DISC worksheet. While you're attending, you may not be able to print it out. You maybe just have a second screen that you can use it with, but you can utilize this worksheet to take notes. It's a PDF, so you can take notes in the PDF. There's also an exercise that we're going to do, and the last page is a chart that you can use after the webinar to help you recognize DISC styles. Continue using this and growing your skills. So I encourage you to take notes, really, because it helps you retain and increase the value of this hour for you. And I want you to get all you can out of the time we're having together. You're here spending time. You want to get something from it. So the second document I want to cover with you is Communicating for Success Strategies booklet. So this is a light read for after the webinar. The document delves deeper into the topic we're discussing. Sorry, let me get that. Today, and will help you develop your skills. Okay, so go ahead and download those. And if you have any trouble, just type in the question bar, the question box, and Eric will help you out. Okay, so also feel free during the webinar to ask questions. You can enter those in the question box, and I'll keep an eye out. And if I don't get to them during our presentation, I definitely will get to it at the end. So now let me ask you, have you ever had a conversation with someone you connected with immediately? You had that sense of connection with them. Well, think about that. How did that feel for you, right? For me, when it happens, I get this feeling of connection. I feel engaged, a little united with the other, right? It's a good feeling. I also feel, energized, appreciated, and understood. Others have shared with me that, makes them feel bonded. They feel a sense of cooperation. Also, they get me. But this is really how you feel when you have a good conversation and you connect. Now, on the other side of the coin, let me ask you, what about when you've had those conversations with someone you clearly did not connect with, right? What was that like? How did that feel for you? For me, it can be a bit uncomfortable. It can be a little annoying, and ultimately kind of dumbfounded by what just happened. But I think what I find worse is feeling not heard, right? You feel disjointed and insecure and awkward. It's really not a nice feeling. It's not what you want, right? You ultimately want to have those conversations where you connect immediately, where people are open and receptive to your message. They're completely engaged. You want to walk up to a developer and be able to share what your testing has found and have them listen to you intently, right? Really pay attention. So Lee Iacocca once said, communication is everything. It all starts here with communication. Communication affects everything, every activity or event, personal and business, you can relate it back to communication in some way, shape, or form. Now, the Project Management Institute reports that over 60%, it's a huge amount, of projects fail because of communication issues. So when I manage a project, my top priority is to develop a communication plan. And in that communication plan, I really want to understand what each team member and stakeholder, what their preferences are, what's important to them, because I need to communicate to them. So whether it's sharing your vision, your mission, your purpose, identifying roles and responsibilities, working together as a team, everything has to do with communications. Wouldn't you agree? So the better we can communicate, the more effective we can be. In the business world, this can have a significant impact on the bottom line. Poor communication can increase your project timelines, it can cost you money, it can increase scope. So good communication is about connecting, building trust, listening and being heard, and you getting the results that you're looking for, right? I know you want better results, right? That's why you're here. We all want better results. The tool we're going to discuss today will take you from good communication to great communication, increasing your success and getting more of what you want. You can apply this tool to anyone you're communicating with because it's focused. Sorry, I keep getting a dialog box appearing in front of me. Okay, so let me step back. So you can apply this tool to anyone you're communicating with because it focuses on how you communicate with a particular individual and how you build trust, establish rapport, lock down the relationship, resulting in more effective transactions. So let's take a look at what communication is made up of. Back in 1972, Albert Mehraban, who was a psychology professor at UCLA, concluded from years of studies and numerous publications on the relative importance of verbal and nonverbal messages, he concluded that communication consisted of three basic elements. Those are voice, words, and body language. So voice is about the tone of your communication. Words is about the content, what we're saying. And then finally, the body language is really the energy that you display during your communication. Albert Mehraban had also established percentages of use of the three elements during face-to-face conversations, and you're going to be surprised on this breakdown. It's interesting. So here it is. So words make up 7% of our communication. Voice or tone is 38%. And body language is 55%. You know, when you prepare for a presentation or a conversation, you put so much emphasis on the content. But at the end of the day, what's really important here is the energy or the body language. That's what's most effective in our communication. You know, consider things like your posture and how you move and stand, what your energy is like. Your body language sets the stage and tells its own story. So for instance, have you ever met someone who while talking makes some kind of big gestures with their hands? Sometimes we refer to it as talking with their hands. So from that activity though, with the hand movement, you kind of get a sense of high energy and enthusiasm from them, right? No matter what they're saying, it's enthusiastic. So now on the other side, you've probably met people, you know, individuals who keep their hands to their sides, maybe in their pockets. They don't move their body around much, and they appear controlled and orderly. Both of these types of body movements play a part in the message that we receive, right? I feel like you can't put enough emphasis on how important body language is to your communication. So as well as as the tone in your voice, right? So the tone should be congruent with the content. So for example, you're working with a teammate and you ask if they would mind if you changed application security for testing purposes, right? And your teammate responds, I don't have a problem with that. And as they say this, they look anxious and they've got their arms crossed. So that tone with that body language tells you that, they might have a problem with me doing that. So had they responded to you more in the, no, I don't have a problem with that, and their body's open, you get a different sense. It's more congruent, right? The tone, the whole message is aligned. So now, although in today's world with email, text, social media sites, body language doesn't play as large a part, and more emphasis is really on the content and the tone. We completely lose body language and a lot of the tonality when we communicate via email. So think about 93% of our ability to communicate the nuances of our message flies out the window in electronic format, right? Computers are a great tool, as you all know. They help us share information, but it's really not ideal tool to foster those meaningful relationships. And that's meaningful relationships is how you're going to get what you want, right? And what you need to get your message across. So there's really no replacement for face-to-face contact with your network. So Peter Drucker, he summed it up very nicely with the quote, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. So how you say and carry yourself plays a huge role in the message you're sending to others. The body language or the energy is the element that we need to learn to modify in our own behavior and be able to adapt to others so that we can create a solid, long-lasting connection. Now, watch plus listen equals learn. You want to pay attention and watch as well as listen and hear. Pay attention with your eyes. The universal language of DISC is the language of observable behavior. In observing others is where you'll find the clues as to how to adapt your style in a particular way so that you can communicate more effectively with others. So before we dig deeper into the universal DISC, language of DISC, let's take a look at the history of behavior models. So behavior models have basically been around forever, right? So the first recorded behavior model was in 444 BC with Empedocles, I have a hard time saying his name, Empedocles, a Greek philosopher looking at the four elements. He looked at earth, air, fire, water, and he identified behaviors based on those elements. Hippocrates, looking at the climates and terrain and its effect on behavior in 400 BC. And then we have Galen in 107 AD. He looked at temperatures and humidities and how it affected our bodies. So, warm, cold, dry, moist. Now let's jump forward to the modern day, 1921, Carl Jung. He looked at 4 psychological functions, further dividing it by introvert and extrovert. Jung was the source, he was really the source for that. And this is really the Myers-Briggs model that we know today. You guys are probably familiar with it, but finally, we come to William Marston, who was very successful in lie detection. And he created the first lie detector polygraph. And an interesting thing about him is he also created the Wonder Woman character, and he wrote the first Wonder Woman comic book. But he is the one that developed what we're talking about today, DISC, back in 1928. He's identified the 4 dimensions of dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. So the commonality here is that behavior models are based on the observation of humans and their tendencies. Behavior models are based on how people react to their environment. We all learn to read people through observation. We observe others, their behavior, and that leads us to determine what approach to take so that we can be most effective with others in our communication. So we do this now, unknowingly, but you're probably all doing it. So language and communication techniques are vital, but really the foundation of effective communication is wanting to be understood by others and desiring to understand what other people are trying to communicate to us, right? So the universal language of DISC is a tool that can first provide you with insights into your own communication style, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then secondly, help you identify behaviors of those around you, which will give you a better understanding of how to communicate with them. DISC is a universal language. It's about how we act. DISC is a neutral language as well, meaning that there's no right or wrong. It applies across the cultures. It's a silent language because you're not outwardly labeling people. You're observing and recognizing their style and then internally making some decisions about how you might adapt, how you're going to communicate or present to them in their communication style. Okay? So it's a universal language, and it's really across the cultures, which is very interesting. And I have a slide later that will show. Now you can use DISC to gain commitment and cooperation, build effective teams, resolve and prevent conflict, and gain endorsement. Right? These are all challenges that you find in the Agile environment. DISC is about identifying how the other person prefers to communicate so you can know how to deal with them and present yourself in a manner that is most comfortable for the other person. If you make the other person comfortable, they are more open and receptive to the message that you're sending. So just as important as what DISC is, let's just touch on what it's not. It's really not personality, skills, and experience. It's not education or training. It's not a measure of their intelligence or their personal values and beliefs. It's really just simply learning, listening, and responding to the behaviors of people. DISC is only a portion of who that person is, and it deals with communication. We can learn a lot about a person by just observing them. Usually you can draw some conclusions about people in just a short conversation. So you probably do it all the time and don't even know it. So the benefits and the areas that DISC can improve your effectiveness is in communication, management and leadership, sales, teams and work groups, right? Negotiations, recruitment and selection, interpersonal relationships. Maybe if you could just kind of take a moment and think about, all that you've heard so far, what ways could you use this? What would be beneficial for you? How could you use this tool at work every day? So there are 4 styles of behavior to make up DISC, right? And I'm going to walk you through these 4 primary behavioral styles so that you can get to know them. We each have a dominant or a core behavior style, which is the style that's most intense and most easily observable and noticeable by someone else, right? This is what we present, probably 80% of the time. Now, just a little side note, so and hopefully not to confuse you, but we do exhibit all 4 behaviors at one time or another. Different things will kick that off, but what we try to do is look for the one that is the primary, right? And that's the one that we want to focus on to improve our communication. So I'm going to go over just kind of quickly here what each of the styles means. So from a director is about how you handle problems and challenges and exercise your power. So if you're a high D, this is you handle problems in a certain way, right? So we have 17% of the population that is a director. Then we have the influencer, and this is about how you interact with others and attempt to influence others to your point of view. And that makes up 38%, which is a good portion of the population. Next, we have the steady or the relator, and this is how you respond to change, variation, and the pace of the environment. That makes up 32%. And then lastly, we have the compliant or the analyzer, and it's how you respond to rules and procedures set by others and the authority. And that makes up 13%. Now, so some of the styles or some of the outcomes we see from learning to identify and understanding behavioral styles are primary, understanding your own behavioral style, recognizing the behavioral style of others, and adapting and blending for greater, more effective communication and relationships. Very important to remember, though, there is no one behavior that is better than another one. There's really no right or wrong behavior here. This is about effectiveness and awareness. And I have to say that the best, most effective teams out there really have a representation of each behavioral style on their team. It's kind of the yin and the yang. They complement one another. So let me share with you another aspect of the behavioral styles. There is a natural style and adaptive style. So natural is our inherent way of doing things, or what we are naturally more comfortable with. And then adaptive is our perception of what we need to do to be most effective. Now, sometimes people are one way at work and another way at home, and others are exactly the same. Adapting is something we all do to some extent, and we do it intuitively. To get the best results, we should have, though, a more planned or purposeful approach to adapting our behavior instead of just kind of unconsciously adapting. So sometimes adapting can be very effective, but sometimes our perception of how we need to adapt may not be effective. And that is why it's important to learn and recognize your own style and how you react in various situations. The key is not to over or under adapt so that you stress yourself out. Understanding yourself will improve your interactions with others. Also, you want to keep in mind that you have a primary or a core behavior and a secondary one. So what that means is that you draw most of your behaviors from the primary, but you also adapted some behaviors of your secondary. So the next thing we're going to go through, though, is the 4 behaviors and look at the characteristics and ways to identify styles and things to do and what not to do with those different behavioral styles. So first, we have the D, and the D stands for director or dominance, and it represents 17% of the population. The D, or the dominant style, indicates how you handle problems and challenges and exercise your power. So some key characteristics of a high D are that they're direct and to the point. They're strong-willed and impatient. The way to recognize the style is that they really love change. Lots of hand motions and gestures when speaking, quick decision makers. But now the value that they bring in a relationship is that they're self-starters and they have a competitive spirit. A way to communicate with the D style is to be direct and brief. They got no time for chit-chat. That's what a D is. So a D wants to know things like, what does it cost? Who else is using this? How much will this increase my effectiveness? They tend to ask what questions. So Ds also make decisions on facts, not emotions. And so the other two styles that are more relationship-based, the I's and the S, they really need to avoid being emotional with the D. That's where one of the pitfalls can be. So just so you can kind of get a person in mind, I don't know if you've ever heard of Gordon Ramsay. He's got a show called Hell's Kitchen, and he represents what a high D or a dominant style would be. In the show, you see him demanding things, to get done and giving little detail on how, right? So that can be a challenging style for most people. Also, the new president, Donald Trump, is a high D. So that should give you a perfect picture of what a D is like. So next, let's go over the I in the DISC. So I is for influencer and represents 38% of the population. And this style indicates really how you interact with others and attempt to influence others to your point of view. Some of the key characteristics of a high I is they're enthusiastic, right? They're spontaneous, they're very sociable. And how to recognize that style is they tend to be disorganized. Lots of piles on their desks, lots of gestures and facial expression when speaking, and dislikes conflict. Right? So values that they bring in a relationship is that they are optimistic. They're a team player and they motivate others towards goals. The best way to communicate with an I style is to be willing to chat. Just have a conversation and get to know one another. That is what a high I likes to do. So you probably know someone, right, that loves to chat. And this may be you, right? But with a high I, you want to avoid focusing on too much detail. They find it oh so boring. Just kind of give them high-level information. In a conversation with an I, they'll probably ask you a lot of who style questions, like who's coming, who'll be there. So that you can get kind of a picture of someone. An example of a high I would be Angelina Jolie. She's an actress, and many of the roles that she plays are very interactive and sociable and upbeat, and she's always out for adventure. So let's talk about the S style. So S is for steady, relator, and it represents 32% of the population. The S and the I's represent the majority of the population at 65%, something like that. These are both relationship-based styles, right? Relationships are very important to both the S and the I. So the S style really indicates how you respond to change, the variation, and the pace of that environment. Some key characteristics is, a high S is a great listener. They're a team player and they're relaxed. How you recognize this style is that they're a little bit shy, but they really want to be your friend. They don't like a lot of change and they're a little slow to make a decision. So values that they can bring in a relationship is that they're calming and stabilizing, the influence that they provide. They're great listeners, they're patient, and they're empathetic. A way to communicate with that S style is to slow down. Take your time when you're speaking with them. With an S, you need to earn their trust. Integrity is very important to an S style, so don't fail to deliver on a promise to them. Now, in a conversation with an S style, they want to know the hows. They like the process and plans. So they'll ask a lot of how questions. So Brad Pitt is probably our best S, some of the roles that he plays. He's more thoughtful, he's careful, he takes time to make decisions and proceed. I think Moneyball is probably the best one that represents that. And another person that you might know is Mother Teresa. She would be a high S as well. So finally, we have the C style. And the C style is for compliance or analyzer, and it represents 13% of the population. The C style indicates how you respond to the rules, procedures set by others and to authority. Now, the C and the D's are both task-based styles. Relationships aren't as important to them. So the key characteristics of a high C are that they're precise, they're logical, and they're quiet. You know, how you recognize this style is that they're perfectly organized. They seek out information and very little chit-chat. But for a relationship, the values that they bring is that they're objective thinkers. They're very diplomatic, and they always ask great questions. So in a conversation, they'll ask a lot of why-based questions. For instance, why is it like that? Why can't that be done? So a way to communicate with this style is to give lots of detail and proven information because they're going to validate it. Never put too much pressure on them for an immediate decision because they'll shut down. Now, to give you kind of an image of a high C style, think of Martha Stewart. In her show, and even magazines, she's very detailed. She's very precise. So hopefully you can see now how this knowledge of styles will help you in your day-to-day life to make more meaningful connections with others and grow your professional network. Right? So knowledge can be most powerful. Now in the worksheet that in the handouts, the last page, I've included a chart that can act as a tool for you to help you going forward to apply what you've learned here. This chart will help you identify behavior styles. Kind of the same key characteristics that we went through is in that chart. So when you're having a conversation or after a conversation with somebody, pull that out, look at it, and try and figure out what style are they. So I have a little, to help you get a better understanding of how the different styles address the same situation. I've put this little going to the beach, the behavior style wording. So for each of the 4 different individuals or styles, they're all going to go to the beach, but they're going to invite differently. So first we have Andrew, who's a D, and he's going to say, I'm going to the beach. Anybody want to come? Right? Direct to the point. So I, Susan, who's an I, says, well, who else wants to come to the beach with me? Right? And then we have Sandra, who's an S. Let's go to the beach at 10. Together we can get that same spot near the beach house. And then C, Michael, he says his invite is, I'd like to get to the beach by 10 a.m. because the weatherman said it's going to be an awesome day. 80 degrees, low wind, and we will have a choice of the best 3 to 4 spots. Who's going to bring the umbrella? So as you can hear, there's a slight difference in how each of the styles approaches this invite. The D, direct and to the point. The I is excited and has very little details. The S is more about the plan and consistency. So S's don't like change, and as you can see, Sandra wants to go to the same spot as before. And then the C is very detailed and has mapped out the whole event, right? So hopefully that kind of helps give you an idea of the different styles and how they approach things. So what I want to do next is to do an exercise so that we can figure out what DISC trait is prominent for you. So in your worksheet on page 2, there is an exercise. You can use that. If by chance you didn't have time to print it or you don't have things, just grab a blank piece of paper. So let's figure out what DISC trait you are, okay? So what I want you to do first is to draw an X and a Y axis, and then label the left side of the X-axis reserved and the right side outgoing. Now what I want you to do is place an X on the X-axis that best fits you. Now consider that the center of the axis is 0, and as you go out to either side, it's a 10. So do you feel outgoing, or do you feel more reserved? And you can put it based on your degrees. So next, now let's label the top of the Y-axis. So the top is task-oriented, and the bottom, put people. Place an X on the Y-axis where it best fits you as well. So are you more task-oriented, or are you more people-oriented? Right? So in this case, this person is more task-based. But again, remember, there is no right or wrong answer here. It's just, it is what it is. So, all right, so let's now connect the X's and complete the border around the 4 quadrants. And this will give you an idea of where you fit into the DISC behavior. So now fill in the quadrants with D, I, S, and C, as you can see. So D is up in the upper right-hand corner. So in this case, we can see that this person is a C. They're compliance. So you should be able to see what you are now, right? Does this seem about right? And you might want to look at that chart, the 3rd page of the worksheet, and kind of go through and examine the characteristics and, is that you? Do you feel like that's you? And sometimes, we're surprised by ourselves. So, and again, remember, this is a high-level exercise just to give you a broad idea of your style. To get a better understanding of what really drives you, I'd recommend going out and doing an assessment. So, behavioral research shows that the most effective people are those who understand themselves, both their strengths and weaknesses. Such self-awareness enables you to develop strategies to meet the demands of your environment. A person's behavior is a necessary and integral part of who they are. Some of our behavior really comes from nature or the DNA, and some from nurture or just upbringing and environment. Utilizing behavior or personality assessments can assist you in understanding yourself. Right? So self-examination on a regular basis is important to your growth in this area. It's kind of like lessons learned. Now, I wanted to share this with you because being in IT, you probably interact with people from other countries and cultures, and since outsourcing can be very popular in IT. But here's a chart that shows a breakdown of the styles from various countries and the percentages of the population. And so let's just kind of quickly look at the highest, and I think it's kind of surprising and interesting. So on a DISC style, a dominant style, D, Russia is the highest with 23%, and China is the lowest with 11%. Kind of a big difference. For I's, the UK comes in at 40%. They're the highest, and then Russia with 33%. S's, we have, what do we have? The Netherlands, I think, is the highest, and then the lowest is Russia. Interesting. And then lastly, China comes in highest with the C's, 22%. So it's interesting just kind of see this in the difference between, our own. So, in China, we have 22%, and Russia 20% under the compliance, and then our country only has 13%, or the US, right? So, interesting facts. So Daniel Pink, he's a leading business thinker and author. He says that we spend 40 to 60% of our time every day trying to persuade others to help us accomplish our goals. I think that's amazing how much time we spend in a persuasion mode. Now, if you could be more effective with your communication, you could spend less time trying to persuade others and make a significant difference in how much you get done, right? So utilizing the DISC tool will lead you to be more effective in your communication and improve your collaboration in your business and personal relationships. So to get more out of what you've learned here today, I believe you need to commit to take some action. And doing this, taking action is really the difference between just acquired knowledge and applied knowledge. So to help you do just that, I want you to write down what your key takeaways are from today's webinar. What resonated with you most? How can you use this? And then what I want you to do is take an action. What one action are you going to take based on what you've heard and you've gained when you get back to the office? What are you going to do with the information? Because if you don't apply it, it's just gone. So take a moment and write down what you're going to do, right? What action do you want to take, and what was one of your key takeaways? I'll give you guys kind of a second for that. And I'll have a glass of water. Now, also, if anybody has any questions, we can now go ahead and throw those in the question box. I don't see, there are some questions in here. How do I'm trying to fix this box. No. While I'm trying to figure out how to get to the questions. Okay, there we go. Is that you, Eric? But before I go to the questions, I'll just real quickly, I want to touch base back on the second handout, the booklet, the Communicating for Success Strategies booklet. It's a real quick read, and it's going to cover self-awareness, versatility, and communication. So it's going to help you deepen your understanding of how to apply the DISC and the communication and improve your effectiveness. So, all right, Eric. So I am not used to using
Yes, Tammy.
So I do see some questions, I believe, right?
Yes, those are just some typical administrative questions. Okay. I took care of those. But awesome. While we're waiting for people to submit some questions, do you have any, just one or two typical questions that you get most often while giving this presentation?
Yeah, actually. So I think the most prominent one is what styles are the easiest to adapt to? And what are the DISC, the DISC are the easiest. But it really depends upon your own personal style on how well you're going to adapt with someone. We all adapt, or not adapt, we all connect with like styles, right? So it's easy for us. That's why, if you're an I or an S, you've got a good portion of the population, right? So You know, if you're an S style, you have 38% of the people that you're going to connect with just quickly and easily because you're the same style, right? And then on the other side, I've asked a lot, what styles have the most difficulty relating to each other? And so that is a very interesting question. So, you know, when as you've seen the exercise we did, the I's and the S's are relationship based, so they connect pretty easily together, right? The D's and the C's, who are task based, are able to connect pretty well. And the D's to the I's, right? Because they're both extroverted and they're very high level. And then we have the C's and the S's that connect because they're introverted. Now the ones that have the most difficulty are the cross, where a D to an S, they just have a really hard time connecting. You really have to work hard on that one, as well as a compliance to an influencer. The cross styles, they too have a difficult time. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, one other question was, someone just wanted to know, are there any websites that you would recommend for learning more about DISC?
TTI Success is a great site. They also offer the DISC assessments, and they have a lot of blogging, so you can read more and learn more about it.
Wonderful. Another person would like to ask, is there a more formal test to take to determine one's DISC style?
Yes, there are DISC assessments out there on the web. There are some free ones, but they're not as accurate. TTI Success they offer an assessment as well. It's, you know, quick 20 questions, so you can go there. I'm hearing feedback. Yeah.
Wonderful. I don't think I think you already answered this question, but we'll just kind of go over it one more time if you don't mind. One person was asked that they think that they show different types of of each part of DISC. Do you get that often? Is there people that have multiple of these traits?
Yes. Well, you all have a primary and a secondary, right? And I'm going back to the S style. We all have a primary and secondary, right? And so the primary is what's going to show up the most. But when we're under stress, we can become a complete opposite of what we are naturally. I personally, actually, I'm a ID, and when I'm under a lot of stress, I become a C. So, and I become a CD, actually. My D side comes out, and I just start being very direct and to the point, and let's get stuff done. You know, you can't account for everything. So you're going to try and identify what their primary is, and which is the majority of what they are, and try to adapt there, because otherwise you're just going to stress yourself out trying to adjust to every little different style, right? So the simple exercise that you did, you know, you can take that back and do that with your team, and that at least gives you each an idea of, you know, who you're working with. And it really, once you know that you're different styles, it's like, oh, okay, I guess, you know, you're much more accepting and understanding. So it's when we don't know that we're causes problems. So.
Wonderful. Another question is, what is the best way to communicate effectively with a high D?
Be direct and to the point. Have all your information ready. D styles can be tough, right? They don't like to waste a lot of time. You really have to be concise. Flattering them is also a great way. They have quite the ego. So asking them questions so that you can tell them about things is a great way. But you've got to be direct with your answers and don't be indecisive. Ds, I find that Ds are probably the toughest for people to deal with, especially the Cs and the S's, because they tend to be more of an introverted person. But you really have to practice on being quick and to the point and kind of forward thinking. And remember, they're competitive. So everything kind of circles around competition for them. So, wow, lots of questions. I'm seeing them fly by now.
Okay.
I figured it out.
Yeah, wonderful. Did you want me to keep going, or did you want to look at the questions then?
So yeah. Why don't you go ahead? Because you know where we're at.
Right. Well, we left off on one person was asking, can you match these styles with Scrum roles?
Interesting. Well, remember, certain styles are going to lean towards certain types of jobs, right? So a compliance person is probably somebody who is more detailed, right? So they're probably a developer. Even testers would probably be more, Cs. But I've seen a lot of everything. Scrums usually are project managers, and they tend to be more Ds and Is. So there's not a hardcore way to do it, though.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have today, Tammy. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar sponsored by IIST, Leaders in Education-Based Certifications and Training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit testinginstitute.com. You can follow IIST on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about IIST news, events, and promotions. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you again, Tammy. It was really, really interesting. A lot of good feedback here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tammy. Have a great day. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.